Well, welcome to Ravensdale Bible Academy. Today's course is Think Again Christian Fact Checking. And today's lesson is from our slide. Democrats like Pelosi want to ban gender references like parents, child, sibling. And then you see this little code here, name 607, Smith, W. And this is from George Orwell's 1984 book. And the question is, what's next? Jumpsuits? And so there's a lot going on in this slide that we would like to address. First of all, maybe you're not familiar with the debate of gender identity or gender referencing. Let me be very simple here. There are people that are trying to convince you that a man is not a man and a woman is not a woman. That's right. There are people who are trying to convince you that you can decide whether or not you're a man or whether or not you're a woman just based on how you feel. You can decide on whether you're a he, a she, an it, or various other descriptions. The count is continuing to grow. So there's literally over 80 different gender identities for a person. It's getting out of control. It's getting out of hand. And so the result is, well, we have to ban things like parents, child, and sibling, mom, dad, he, she, because you might offend somebody. Because you can look at me and say, excuse me, sir, or him, and I could look back at you and say, I'm not a him, I'm a she. And what we're seeing is a radical, aggressive shift in our culture that's trying to redefine gender identity. And the big question that we want to ask ourselves is, why? Why is this taking place? Is this just taking place because of a sensitivity for some people who are gender confused? Is that why we want to be sensitive to a very, very small percentage of America? Why are we changing gender pronouns? Why are we pretending what is very clearly self-evident that I am a man? And there's scientific and biological evidence to prove that as well, not just my looks, because I know I could put on a wig and put on makeup and have hormones and airbrush and probably, look very pretty. Well, maybe not me, but. So our question is, and it is a political question. So when we start off, what we want to do is we want to identify, well, what's the issue behind the slide, right? And so Democrats and liberals, like Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, she's from California, they're pushing for gender identity language. So our language now has to change, right? And so she wanted to change the rules in the House. She wanted to change the rules in the House of Representatives, which is one of the three branches of our government. This means that all gender identities would have to be accepted. You're making up genders, and I have to accept that. But it also gives us maybe a little bit of insight as to the why. Why are they doing this? Well, in George Orwell's book, 1984, he predicts, and he wrote this book in the 50s, and he predicted that by 1984 that there would be this society, and in this society and in their attempt and thirst to get control and to control people, control their minds, control their thoughts, control their actions, one of the ways you would do that is to remove their personal identity. And so names didn't matter. So Winston Smith, that's what the W stands for, Winston, is really not Winston Smith anymore. He's 6079 Smith, W. And then short for 6079. There's no identity. There's no reference to gender. There's no reference to his personhood. And of course, part of that is to try to remove, in essence, the gender of the sexes, male and female. So they all wear, these jumpsuits, right? Because everybody's got to look the same. They'll just try to sterilize. We don't want to have any personification that I would identify even by our clothing, male and female. Well, we begin then with, again, this concept of where a person's assigned sex can differ from their gender identity. And if this is new to you, it can be complex, but we're going to try to keep this very, very basic. And so, of course, there is no consistency in verifying this evidence, right? There's no consistency in verifying or supporting the claims that people are currently making. And so we see that Pelosi, again here, she wants to take out the he or the she. No more he and she. Somehow that's an offensive statement, right? Remove the gender-specific terms. And here's part of the irony of this. She can't even do it herself. So either she's foolish or a hypocrite. But right away when she made her announcement, and where people are clever now, and we could go to her Twitter and even just addressing herself, she instantly falls into, well, hey, look, I stand before you as a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a daughter. Well, according to her rules, we're not supposed to identify like that anymore. You look at her Twitter page and she describes herself as, a mother and a grandmother. Why is it that these politicians want to change the world with these radical ideas, but they're not even willing to do it themselves? Now that would cry back to the 1984 George Orwellian hypocrisy of, well, of course, there's people in the fringe, people in the elite status groups that what's good for you is not what's good for them. That, you should do this, but I'm going to do whatever I want to do. It's really a slap in the face. And so part of the problem here is we're seeing a culture that's trying to align and fighting so hard to accept a certain segment of our population. And we call it the homosexual movement or the LGBTQ movement. And these are people who are denying their God-given attributes for a man to be with a woman and a woman to be with a man. In fact, the Bible talks about this as exchanging what is right for what is wrong, right? So this, of course, completely violates the biblical standards. When we look at this and when we fact check and we say, well, is it okay for Pelosi to just kind of remove genders? Is that acceptable? Is that something that we can work with? Well, when we go to the Bible and we want to get our bearings, we see right away in Genesis 1, in the first chapter of the first book in the Bible, we see that God creates male and female. He makes that distinction, right? Very, very clear. We can see that there's scientific factors, right? We can look at the biology of our chromosomes, our hormones, genitals, additionally things like, females menstruate and give birth. To this date, not one man in the history of the universe, of the world, has given birth. Why? Because a man is a man and a woman is a woman. A man does not give birth, a woman gives birth. It's really not that complicated. But politicians like Nancy Pelosi are foolish. They're kidding themselves. Again, here's an example of the Twitter. She can't even keep her own story straight, right? She can't follow her own advice. The truth is, they don't really believe this. if they really believed this, if in their minds, in their heart, they believed it, it wouldn't be hard for them to communicate these ideas. It would just naturally flow out of them. But even the inventors of these new rules, the inventors of this newspeak, another 1984 Orwellian concept where the government will create new speech, new ways of talking and communicating. But see, they don't really believe in it, but they want to force you to believe it, which takes us back to our original question of the slide. Why are they doing this? If this is just to be nice, if it's just to be sensitive, then why are they forcing everybody to do it in such a manner? Because, may I suggest, it's not a personal reason, it's a political one. It's not personal, it's political. They want to force you, they want to control you by force. They want to start eliminating your identity by pretending like they're propping up somebody else's identity. It's a very tricky process that they do. And it leads me back to dystopian 1984 and the opposite of utopia, the opposite of the ultimate society, the best way to live is dystopian. It's the bad version, right? So 1984 is the imperfect society. It's the bad society. And in these dystopian books, we always see these 5 characteristics. And this is where I want you to really put your logic hat on, okay? So when we are evaluating whether or not Nancy Pelosi should be able to change the genders, right? I want you to think about this and think about how does this relate to today, if it does. But the 5 techniques, the 5 characteristics for perpetrating this fraud, for perpetrating this bad society is, first, government control. The government always has to be in complete control. Second, environmental destruction. They always have some kind of prediction or some kind of environmental catastrophic destruction that demands that we all have to follow this same path. Sound familiar? Number 3, technological control. Technology is in charge. Technology is the moral base. Technology drives the ship. Wow. If that's not like what's happening today with big tech controlling thought, I don't know what is. 4th, survival. To scare you, right, into your very existence. You will die. You will die because of COVID. You will die because of climate. You will die because of the greenhouse effect. You're going to die because of flooding. You're going to die because of earthquakes. It's always this survival mode. And then 5th, loss of individualism. Loss of individualism. No names, no gender, no personality, no individualism. And so if you think like these gender bans sound like a dystopian 1984 novel, well, before you follow the pathway of the liberals and the Democrats and their gender identity changes, think again, Christian.